Seahawks fans, wherever you may be. Thanks for listening to the show. Join your hosts, Bill Alvstad and Keith Myers, as we talk Seahawks football. Hey, hi, Seahawks fans. Welcome back to another episode of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, sitting down with co-host Keith Myers. We're here to talk Seahawks football. Got a great show for you planned today. We're recapping the NFL Combine, the 4 days of measurements and workouts for all the prospects in the NFL draft, and find out what we thought about the different position groups, the strengths and weaknesses, some of the prospects that we had our eyes on heading into the weekend, how those folks did, anybody that popped out to us, all that kind of stuff. Welcome in, Keith. Good show today.
Yeah, it'll be a fun show. Lots to talk about. Should we kick things off with all of the DK Metcalf nonsense that's out there?
Sure.
Because the
it is the speculation time of the year, but I will say this, I like Corbin Smith. You do too. He's the source, along with a single source, I believe, in Green Bay. We're talking about a trade proposal that apparently has got a little bit of legs to it, only in that this proposal is supposed to have been actually made and laid on the table to entice the Seahawks to make a trade of DK Metcalf for Green Bay's first round pick, 23 overall, plus a player, a couple different wide receiver prospects apparently up for grabs. And so apparently confirmed by Corbin Smith and another writer in Green Bay. Keith, what do you think? I know that you said it was kind of garbage, but is there any weight to this at all, or is just one of those nothing burgers this time of the year?
Other teams can propose trades to Seattle. That doesn't mean Seattle's paying any attention to them. And just because Green Bay is coming after him with we have an offer on the table, it doesn't mean that Snyder's considering it. And if you listen to Snyder, he said he's not available. So I think it's one of those things where, sure, there's an offer on the table and it's going to sit there until there's movement where Seattle's actually talking about possibly doing something. I don't care how many offers are on the table. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. Well, it does get your attention. First round pick. Now, to be completely honest, I didn't think that DK Metcalf would command a first round pick. I mean, obviously, I think Seattle doesn't make a move unless it's a first round pick. I wasn't expecting one. I was thinking maybe a second and a fourth, maybe a player. And that would be kind of where his numbers were. There hasn't been a first round pick for a wide receiver since 2022 in the NFL. DK's a young prospect, tantalizing, height, weight, speed combo, all that stuff. We know all of those things with a big contract number in Seattle. Seattle would be able to clear some space. That's the advantage contractually to Seattle doing this deal. And another pick in the top 25 certainly is somewhat appealing, but the hit rates on those things are, 50-50 at best over the history of the NFL draft. So no guarantees there. Overall, if it was a legit deal, let's just talk about that. If it was a legit offer and it was taken seriously by John Schneider, what are the benefits to the trade if it was to be made, and what are the downsides?
Well, the downsides is you lose one of the better weapons in the entire league in Metcalf, just his speed and size. There was a reason why opposing teams, double or triple covered him all game, every game last season. He was the focal point of defenses. JSN ended up with the stats, but he ended up with a lot of the stats because Metcalf was the focal point of the defense. And you lose that, and that's huge. And I know that some people, for some reason, don't like him and whatever. I can't speak to that, but I just know that like he's as physically gifted of a receiver as you'll ever find, and you don't trade guys like that. And I know you said that no wide receiver has gone for a first round pick. What wide receiver hasn't even been close to DK Metcalf? When they were being traded, like none of them, none of the guys that have been traded, none of the wide receivers are even close to as valuable as him. So of course he's going to go for a third or first round pick, and a first round pick probably isn't enough to get him off Seattle's roster, just because he's worth more to you towards winning than that first round pick could possibly give you if it's in like in the mid 20s. Like there's nothing that you're going to be able to take at that spot that will be as valuable to you this coming season as DK Metcalf.
Yeah, the more likely scenario, and we've talked about this many times, Seattle needs to try to clear some space, be able to be active in free agency. One of the contracts out there up for an extension would be DK Metcalf. You can get his 2025 cap number down below where it's at now at $31 million. I believe that they're going to try to do that. And you get him into the 20 range or the 18 range first year cap hit and push some money out a little bit. And you extend him for another 3 or 4 years and lock in one of your best players, a player that obviously tilts the field. And John Schneider loves that. And definitely a good player, solid player, solid player. Yes, underutilized at times, miscast a little bit. Shows his emotions on his sleeve occasionally, gets a few penalties now and again, obviously. But that is, those things are not legitimately detractions from the talent that he brings to the table and overall net positive that he brings. However,
he just wants to win.
However, I would argue that, you're going to pay a player a third contract, which rarely works out in the NFL. Now he's still young, yes, but he'll be in his 30s by the time a new contract were to end. And it's going to be very expensive. DK Metcalf will command a top 5 wide receiver salary in the NFL, which puts him in the neighborhood of like $32 million APY. And he statistically, now I know what he does physically on the field, as well as helps other wide receivers out because he's double teamed all the time. But statistically, he performs at a top 15, top 20 level as far as production. And so do you pay a third contract to a wide receiver at top dollar for top 15, top 20 wide receiver production? Or do you reallocate resources potentially to another position group, offensive line, that could also improve your team while still acquiring a wide receiver talent to replace DK in this offense that's going to be a little bit more balanced, where DK may not get the number one wide receiver opportunities that maybe he would somewhere else. To me, it's an enticing offer. It's something that you stop and you really kind of take seriously, I think. If it was 23 overall, plus a player, maybe maybe another mid-round pick, I would consider that.
I mean, I just think that whatever you get back, whoever you take at 23 will not be as good as Metcalf. By taking that trade, you will have hurt your ability to win in 2025.
There are no weapons in this draft like DK Metcalf.
Nope.
But there are other players at other positions that also provide value in a different way. For example, what if Jackson Dart was the player that we took at 23? Player with a lot of upside, player that is clearly a valuable position group in the NFL, warranted at that spot in the draft,
and who's he going to throw to?
Well, obviously you replace, what if you took somebody at 18 or somebody at 50, or you moved around a little bit and you got Golden or something like that in the 30s or 40s. I just think that there are other opportunities out there, right? To being married to DK Metcalf, when maybe this isn't the optimal offense. We have so many other things that we need to address that are deficient, offensive line, that we could reallocate those resources to.
Yeah, I don't know. It's like there are so many draft busts every year, and the percentage of guys, the likelihood that you're going to get someone who's going to be a reasonably good contributor if you don't pick in the top 20 at that position is not all that great. And so that's why the Tyler Lockett's are a big deal, because he's performed at that level for his most of his career without having to be that draft pick. Those are not common. And if you're not spending that pick on a wide receiver, then you're not going to have anywhere close to the talent. And even if you are spending it on a wide receiver, there's no DK Metcalf in this draft. And they're probably, and the ones that are like good weapons are probably gone by then anyway.
I don't know if you necessarily have to have a DK Metcalf prototype replacement for DK.
No, I just mean like an elite number one.
Yeah. So as you know, Keith, all too well, and most of our listeners know, that we just kind of have these theoretical ideas and arguments. I don't necessarily align myself with approval on that idea. I just wanted to make sure that we talked about the entire spectrum of the idea, because I think it is one of those things that you come up upon in the NFL, where you do have a salary cap. You do have areas where your team is, you do reallocate resources from time to time. We did that, from the safety group to the defensive line last year. So there is that sort of interplay. And when there's a legit offer on the table, and I think, a first round pick and a player and a mid round pick would be a legitimate, you take seriously offer. I just think it's worth a conversation. I don't necessarily think it will happen, or would that be my first choice? No, you want to be able to retain your best players, obviously. But it's just, it's an idea that I think is worth a discussion. And maybe this isn't the right place to do it, since we are talking about the combine. So overall impressions, Keith, on the combine, thoughts about what your ideas were coming in, maybe impressions that you left with after day 4.
Well, I think overall impression, I was disappointed in how many people sat out workouts. Only 4 quarterbacks took part in any workout. Most of them, only 3 took part in most of them.
Define workout, Keith, because I watched at least 5 or 6 guys throw.
Yeah, but those drills aren't. You're throwing against a guy who is completely uncovered. Like, there is no defense. You're just lobbing it up there and seeing if you can get it to him, which if you can't get it to him, then you shouldn't even be there at all at the combine. So I go show me that you have some athleticism, that you might be a threat to pull the ball down and scramble and pick up a first down. And only, like I said, only 4 guys were willing to do that. And that was really disappointing.
So you're talking about the agility testing and 40 time and
Yeah, just all
kind
that
of
stuff. You know, and then
Yeah.
like you look at the cornerbacks, and the cornerbacks had 3 guys that ran the 3-cone. Okay, the 3-cone is like the most telling thing for a corner. Like, it's, can you stay with the wide receiver? Can you change direction quickly? And 3 people did it out of all the corners that were there. Like,
So I think you're pointing to an overarching fundamental issue with the combine and the NFL channel and the way that it's structured, the timing of the drills and so forth. I think you used to have these prospects have much more participation overall when the combine was in the mornings and so on and so forth. So not necessarily taking points away from prospects for not doing those things, just based on this, when they're scheduled and so forth. And they do generally do pro days and private workouts as well. So we end up getting that information, I think, and teams end up getting the information I think they need on most prospects. There are certainly some that will not work out at all, but most of them do. I just, this made for TV consumption thing called the combine may not be the right place. And depending on timing, the prospects might, coming off an injury or whatever. I'm not trying to make excuses. I'm just saying that it just doesn't seem to be as important as it used to be. I don't know why. I mean,
guys
I don't know
coming
why.
off injuries or, that kind of stuff. If a guy like, just, if they've got like a hamstring that's a little tight because, their workouts and they want to, like, they're not going to risk an injury for something like this. Fine. But we're not talking about a guy. We're talking about an entire position group.
Right.
Of
Which
people
tells
sitting.
me there's something structurally wrong with the combine itself.
Yeah.
Not with the
And this has
players.
been a problem since they switched it and tried to make it a made for TV event, which honestly, it does not make for good TV.
No, it does not.
It's kind of terrible. Even for guys like you and I that love this stuff and really want to get into it, it's still boring and not
you
and
can't
not
possibly
a good.
watch every second of it. It's too much.
Yeah, and so it's like I think they've tried to monetize it to a point where nobody, like, the players aren't participating anymore, and that's unfortunate. It's unfortunate for the teams. It's unfortunate for the players, and really it's unfortunate for the fans because having those numbers to go through and look at when you're doing mock drafts or reading other people's mock drafts, it's fun, it's useful, and not having it kind of sucks. But you said, okay, that's my overall like impression is just I'm tired of that.
Yes.
I will say you go through and you look at this. I was a little surprised at the running back group. There's some guys that ran real fast. And the number of guys that kind of beat that threshold of 4.5 was more than I was expecting. And so I'm a little, I like that. I like that group a little better than I did, going in. I was a little disappointed with
14 running backs ran a sub 4.5 40.
Yeah.
I
was a little disappointed with Ollie Gordon.
210.
Ollie Gordon, who is one of the guys that I liked in an earlier mock draft, 4.61. Devin Neal 4.58. Like, these are guys that.
But he is 226 pounds, so 4.61. Maybe you can get that into the 4.5s at his pro day, maybe.
Yeah. So, yeah, even like Damian Martinez at 4.51. I'm like, that's okay. It's just outside the 4.5, but whatever. That's close enough for me. But yeah, this is a lot of guys that ran really well out of the running back group. So I like to see that. I like the fact that it's a more athletic running back group than I think we've seen in a few years.
Yeah, that Bashul Tootin ran a 4.32 40 with a 1.49 10-yard split. with a 40.5-inch vertical and a 10-10 broad jump. He helped himself, I think. I really liked Quinshawn Junkins from Ohio State. I liked the way that he looked. I liked the way that he moved. 221 pounds, 4.48 40, 151 split, which again is just really a good time. 11 feet in the broad jump. I mean, almost 39 inches in the vertical. I think he really helped himself. He's kind of a sea hockey guy for me. That would fit really nice, and very physical runner, and so on and so forth. His counterpart there, Henderson, also did well, 4.43 40, just a little bit more undersized, catch the ball out of the backfield kind of a guy, but overall athletically, those two looked good. Omar and Hampton looked amazing to me. Amazing. Like I thought he had one of the best workouts, but he ran a 4.61, but you know, yeah, I think he can run into the 4.49, 4.48 range. I think that he's gonna do better at this program.
Yeah. Taj Brooks, out of Texas Tech, put together a real nice combine. One of the good performers on this. His 3-cone was under 7 seconds. That puts him with the best, the top third of the wide receivers. His short shuttle of 4.06 is just straight up elite. Just overall, like, had a good workout, showed athleticism that I think it was somewhat unexpected. I mean, he's got that agility and that acceleration, and teams are going to look at that and go, we can work with that, because that's something that we know. Okay, 4.52. That's not it's not slow. It's maybe not the fast as we want, but we can work with that. There's explosiveness there and agility and the ability to make people miss. And I think he helped himself a lot, because he was like so far down off the radar before the combine, and him coming in and putting together that kind of workout was impressive.
Yeah, no, there were a number of wide receivers. If we're going to stick with that group for a minute, Jaden Higgins, Ohio State, and Jalen Noel. Noel raised their stock, I think. Noel put on a show with a 41.5-inch vertical and 11.2 broad with a 4.39 40 at 194 pounds. And then Higgins is just a big guy at 6'4", 214 pounds, 4.47 40, 39-inch vertical, 10.9 broad jump. Really good, savvy route runner and high football IQ with that athleticism on display at the combine. I think his stock was at least solidified, if not bumped up a little bit. Matthew Golden, I really liked Matthew Golden. He's going to be a fringy first-round pick, early second round, I think. 5'11", 191, 4.29 40, fastest 40 at the combine. Luther Burden looked good. He was supposed to be the first player off the board at wide receiver, the second player. He looked good. There was a lot of guys. Tez Johnson didn't look good. Like, if there were a few wide receivers that hurt themselves, I thought he did. He only weighs 154 pounds, but he ran that 40-yard dash in 4.51.
Yeah.
And then his, the agility stuff pointed to a guy that just wasn't super athletic.
Well, I mean, he had the best 3-cone out of any of the wide receivers, which that's a good sign. But then, in his short shuttle put him he was the 4th best. So, I mean, there's the agility, but the broad jump, the vertical, the not just the 40, the long, but even the 10-yard split, just none of those things were super impressive in any way. And at a guy who's as small as he is.
Yes.
Like,
that's the key, right? You got to, he's got to be able to figure out a way to get into the NFL and get on a roster and get playing time. And I mean, for me,
how he does it.
He went from like a second round, third round guy to maybe fourth, fifth with numbers like that, unless NFL teams came into the combine knowing those things ahead of time.
I think that he started out as a fourth or fifth round prospect and may have ran himself out of the draft. He's just so small. Like, it's not an NFL body. So Jack Beck was a guy that I was really excited to see because he just out of TCU, he's a guy that 6'1", 214, looks like he's going to be the real deal at the next level. Someone who's going to be a steady contributor throughout an entire career. He came in good 3-cone. Short shuttle wasn't great, but it wasn't bad. It was like, but it was it's above average, but I was hoping for better. But he didn't run the 40, and so that's one of those where you look at that and you go, okay, if he had run that, I think we'd feel a little better about where he's at. But overall,
but he looked great on the on-field drills, though.
Yeah, I don't think he did anything to hurt himself in this, and just he kind of everything that he does, whether it was in this last season and then the Senior Bowl and then now the Combine, he just keeps checking boxes on a guy that you think you can depend on.
Yeah, I think like A.O. Maynor out of Stanford helped himself for 440, 38.5-inch vertical, 10.7 broad, and he looked good in drills. Chamari Dyke, the wide receiver out of Florida, looked impressive. 6'1", 196, and he looks like he can also return kicks as well. He ran a 4.3, 440. Nice vertical. Matthew Golden again. Going down my list here. A couple guys, later guys. Isaiah Nair, wide receiver in Nebraska at 6'4", 218, ran a 4.40 with a 1.51 split. 38-inch vertical, 11.1. There's a lot of athletes in the wide receiver group. If you see some upside on a guy, this group runs like 20, 25 deep, where you can get a guy specific to what you're looking for in the draft, in this draft. I really liked it.
So what did you think of the tight ends in this?
Yeah. So, Dan Viennes came over on Friday and watched the tight end group with me, along with linebackers, I think is what we were watching. And now I liked the tight ends. I thought Terrace Ferguson looked outstanding from Oregon. I had him in his kind of a back end of the second round, third round grade. I think he solidified himself in the second round. 4.6, 340, a 39-inch vertical. Those were both tops out of the position group. I thought Fanning looked okay. I'm not a huge fan, and he ran a 4.7, 140 at that 339 weight, which I was a little underimpressed with. But he did the second fastest 3-cone drill of all the tight end prospects at 6.97.
Which is good.
Gunnar Helm didn't run because he did run. He ran a 4.84, but he kind of hurt himself in that drill and rolled an ankle, but competed in all the other stuff after that. Mason Taylor did not run the 40, but looked smooth and fast in every drill. I thought the gauntlet was a really good drill for him. He looked so natural and smooth and in and out of breaks quickly, and nice soft hands. I like the group overall. I think I didn't see really anything in testing or on-field drills that changed my mind about any particular prospect. And, the top 2 or 3 didn't work out at all. So it's just like Arroyo and, the 2 guys at the top just
I really wanted
didn't
to see what
but-
Arroyo did here. I was hoping he would come in and to, work out, because he's got a guy that was kind of looked at as a third or fourth round prospect, but came into the Senior Bowl and just dominated. And so people were going to be watching, and then he didn't work out. So we'll have to wait and see how he does it at the pro day.
So the other part of that group was the linebackers. I thought that Chris Paul looked good, 4.6, 340, looked good on the field drills. Jihad Campbell solidified himself as the number one linebacker in the class at 4.52 speed. Just looked the part. 6'3", 235 pounds. I noticed that the heaviest linebacker in this entire combine was only 247 pounds. Everyone else was lighter than that. And I think that's the trend, where you're about 235 now is where guys are coming in at, even for a middle linebacker. I thought that was interesting. Okay, let's talk about the quarterbacks. I was impressed with a couple of guys, and a couple of guys kind of let me down a little bit. Let's talk about Jackson Dart.
Okay.
I was really looking forward to watching him throw as a prospect. I watched an interview earlier in the week with him. Very impressed with that. I understand Seattle's met with him privately a couple different times in this process, at Senior Bowl and then here at the Combine. And I didn't see anything at all that would lower his stock. Like everything he did on the field stuff, his throws were accurate. I watched him working out while a lot of different prospects were running the 40. He was throwing the ball and getting really lathered up, just warming up for the event. I was impressed with that because when he came in, he was the guy that looked like he was most ready to throw the ball and do well during the drills. So he's going to move up, Keith. I really honestly believe he's probably getting close to a first round lock now. It doesn't necessarily mean you pick him at 18, but maybe you end up doing that. If he's your guy and he's the fit in the offense, the future of the franchise, and you've established that and you go get him, I would be fine with that. I honestly would. After looking at him, looking through all the film, I think he can make every throw. I'm not exactly sure why he's the third quarterback on the board right now. I think that he may be above Sanders.
Oh, I don't think he has anywhere near Sanders' upside.
Well, that's true. Maybe.
And
not
the other thing
upside,
is that if you go back and you look at his tape, when he gets moved off his spot, when there's pressure, things break down pretty quick for him. He's not a guy that creates and does things off script really well. And I think that has a lot to do with it, because in the NFL, you rarely have a clean pocket. If you can't do what you do unless you have a clean pocket, that's going to be a problem. So there's so much to like there, but there's enough concerns that I would, and honestly, a lack of the upside of some of the other guys. I think that putting him third in there is probably about the right spot for him. But I do think he's a first round pick. He may not be a top 5 pick, but I don't think he gets out of the first round. I know people were talking about him as a mid-second for a while. No, I think if he drops past Seattle, someone will trade up into the back of the first round and 30 to 32 to take him, just to get that 5th-year option, because it's so much cheaper than having to go pay a guy. So I think that's really what they're looking at. He's not getting out around 1.
I agree. And I'm thinking Seattle's going to be one of those teams that is going to take a really hard look at this prospect. And, if they don't pick him, they pass on him, then I don't know what John Schneider's looking for. I really honestly don't. I just it's got to be the right thing, obviously. But he's so young and so much upside there. I would take a shot at this one. Now, one of the other prospects that I was not expecting anything from during the combine, but then surprised me, was Quinn Ewers. I just, when I watched, he just looked pedestrian to me throughout the season and just kind of, but I understand he was kind of going through an oblique injury and so forth that really impacted. I heard that straight from Sark's, the coach. I can't remember his name, Sark, during interview. And, he came in and just had a really solid performance. And I really liked the command that he had, the presence that I saw out there on the field with the other guys, and then the actual throws where he was placing balls, all over the field and so forth. I thought he was very accurate, and it came easy. Those balls came out, spin tight, and got down the field. So he's a prospect that I would take another look at. And it wouldn't surprise me, based on a whole bunch of other factors outside of the combine, outside of the workouts and so forth, where I think John Schneider would really like this prospect. And so Quinn Ewers has got to be a guy, I think, that is going to be on Seattle's draft board. It really just depends on where he goes. Now, from what I'm hearing and understanding of these prospects like Quinn Ewers, Will Howard, Jackson Dart, Jason or Milrow, these guys were thought of as being guys that were third round-ish range. And I believe that all of the guys I just mentioned are not going to make it out of the second round. So Ewers is probably going to have to go at 50 if he's going to be available. You're on mute, Keith.
I was going to say Riley Leonard's another one that you need to add to that list that I don't think is out of the second round.
Yeah.
A guy
I really liked him.
A guy that I just honestly was not on my radar at all until this was Brady Cook. And he's a guy that came out and did all the drills and showed off some really, really nice athleticism, like a guy that can win with his feet. And then, hit the take on him, pre-combine was that this is a guy that can win with short accuracy, just really accurate on the, short inside, 8-10 yards downfield stuff. And okay, now you add his ability to run. If you can get him with a coach that can, calm his mechanics down slightly and get him so where he can, reliably hit a deep ball, you might have something there. And right now, I don't even know if he's got a draftable grade, but he'll probably end up now getting drafted.
He was in the NFL draft mock database at like 450th prior to the combine. And so I hadn't even looked at him. I just never even heard of him. But at the combine, I was impressed. Like, he was one of only two prospects to run. He came in at like a 4.63 or something like that. I don't have the numbers in front of me. I don't have any notes on him at all. But he looked so good throwing the ball. He just looked natural. 4.59. He looked so natural.
His three cone of 7.01 and short shuttle of 4.17. I mean, those are like running back numbers to go with, 6'2", 214, and his ability to throw the ball. And I think you could, take him and put an offense together where you're running a lot of, like quarterback option kind of stuff, because he has the ability to do it.
Yeah. Interesting prospect for sure. How about defensive backs? I know that we have talked about a few guys, but the athleticism and the speed out of this group really stood out. How about a couple of guys that really stood out to you?
Okay. You cannot get through a defensive back at the combine conversation and not talk about Nick Inamori.
Yes.
The safety out of South Florida. This guy, 6'3", 220, ran a 4.38, even better at a 10-yard split of 1.49, jumped out of the building, 43-inch vertical, 11 foot 6 inches on the broad jump.
That's amazing.
He just put on a show of athleticism. And at that size, 6'3",
the explosion,
220,
dude.
yeah.
6'3", 220, had a 43-inch vertical and an 11.6 broad. The explosion in that, and then that 4.38. It's like, there were some people, Keith, that had him pegged as kind of a will linebacker, just because they didn't believe, I think, that he could be a in the box safety and really kind of move around like he did. Now that he's gone through the combine and verified those agility and athleticism numbers, he's going to be a weapon. So yeah, he will take some snaps at will. He's a perfect weapon for Mike Macdonald. Like, I'm getting to the point, Keith, on this prospect where I could see him now moving into the top 20 because of this. Now, yes, he's a safety, but you have to go beyond that. If you're a fan, and say, well, it's not a positional value. You can't take him at 18 because blah, 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 blah. And I don't think people understand the way that Kyle Hamilton was used in Baltimore. Like, he lined up in the nickel as a big safety in the nickel. He lined up at will linebacker. He dropped back into coverage. He played, is deep third and quarters coverage for that team, as well as just being in the box, defending the run, getting outside to edge, covering tight ends and running backs out of the backfield. He's probably the most important defender in that Baltimore scheme. And you got a player like this that's the combo of Hamilton, only faster. Like, Hamilton ran a 4.6 40. And Cam Chancellor, a guy that's just a thumper that's going to, you go watch this guy on the tape and he sets a tone for your defense. And then you add all this athleticism stuff just to make this prospect so tantalizing to me. At 18, I would take this guy. Unless I hadn't solved any of my offensive line issues in free agency and you had to pick for need, you clearly would maybe go with Membu or somebody like that was above him as a prospect. Mm-hmm. But this guy's got to be on their board for sure.
Right now, you're looking at make your short list of guys that you would stick at 18 and pick. Membu's on there, and Amari should be on there. And I know that people are because they went into this process thinking he was going to be like an early 3rd round pick. I think that was I don't think that was real. I think he came in as a late round 1, and all he's done is move up. And Jackson Dart's going to be one of those guys, and there's a couple of defensive linemen that I think would too. But you're really looking at you're really looking at guys that are, there's not that many of them, and there's just a lot of talent, and it's going to be hard to pass up. This really is.
Yeah. So another guy, not a safety, but a corner, is Maxwell Hairston. Now, when I looked at Hairston earlier, I kind of discounted him in a probably too early. He's 5'11", and he's 183 pounds. And I just didn't know that he was going to be so athletic. Mm-hmm. He ran that 4.28 40, fastest time at the combine, almost 40 inches in the vertical, almost 11 inches or 11 feet in the broad jump. really smooth out of his breaks through drills, the flexibility, the burst. He's a first round corner. Like I thought he was going to be in the 50 range for the Seahawks potentially, if that's what they were going to do and look at him. If he was their type, but Jahdae Barron's out there, and you look at both those guys, both those prospects, I would consider both of them, except for Barron's got under 30-inch arms. And, he kind of looks like that Trent McDuffie style quarterback. And McDonald, liked that at Baltimore, but Harrison's kind of got everything for you. And I think he moved up and helped himself at the combine.
So the guy, of the corners, that really impressed me the most, and a guy that I'm going to be watching going, please end up in Seattle, is Darian Porter, out of Iowa State. This kid's 6'3", 195, ran a 4.30 40. Also had a 3-cone of 6.7 and a short shuttle of 4.04. I mean, those are great numbers for wide receivers. And so if you can, at 6'3", put those together, that means you can stick to anyone. You got the speed, you got
scheme
the
diversity.
You can do a lot of stuff. And then when I was, kind of researching him a little bit, Lance Sterling of NFL.com, his NFL comparison, Rick Woolen.
Yes.
And so I'm like, I could get behind that, because he's just such an athletic guy, just kind of a really special athlete, to be that tall, that long, and still have the speed and agility. I'd love that.
Yeah, no, fun prospect for sure. Another guy that's got the scheme diversity stuff is Marquise Siegel, the defensive back out of Kansas State. It wasn't really on my radar prior to the combine, just hadn't got to his film yet. But 4.37 in the 40-150 split, 38-inch vertical, almost 11-foot broad jumped. He can play 4 spots for you on the defensive back end: free safety, strong safety, boundary, corner, and slot. And we know how much they value that diversity in Seahawks, in Seattle scheme. So a player like that probably on their radar.
Okay, so what we've got left, the guys that we've kind of skipped over here, are the big uglies on both sides of the ball.
Yeah.
The offensive line and defensive line. And there's something about watching, 300-pound guys try and run the 40 that is entertaining in a way that isn't particularly useful for figuring out draft status. But there were some really good performers overall, in terms of just everything, with the offensive line. And, guys like Tate Ratledge out of Georgia, the guard.
That's a scheme fit guy too.
Yeah, I mean, this is a guy that came in and ran a 3-cone of 7.38. I mean, that's better than a lot of linebackers. And for a guy that size to be able to do that, just, kind of goes to show you that he's someone who has the athleticism to get out in space and make blocks and not have guys run around him.
Yeah, that 3-cone at 7.38, Keith. That was number 1 overall for all offensive linemen there. And I think he is a great scheme fit for Seattle. I think at right guard, he could be the right guard guy. And then his counterpart there at offensive center, Jared Wilson, I think
who also had a really good combine.
Had a great combine. 4.84 was second overall in the 40-yard dash. The 9.4 broad jump was best among interior linemen. And I think that he's a scheme fit, for Seattle on the wide zone stuff. So those are 2 prospects, I think, that did well in the combine that Seattle will have on their draft board.
And then there's a couple of guys that anyone that listens to us know that we like that did well. Greg Zabel had a good combine, including jumping 36.5 inches in the vertical. And Armand Membo had a great combine as well. Just showed off that he's not just a big guy. He's an athlete. 34-inch vertical. 31 reps on the bench press for Membo. I mean, this guy he's legit. I think that I don't think he's going to end up as a tackle in the next league. I think he's going to end up as a guard.
I don't know, man. That athletic testing and the fact that he does have over about 33-inch arms at 332 pounds with the feet and agility that he displayed. I think that he's going to get a shot at right tackle before he moves inside.
Probably.
I believe anyway.
Yeah, probably. Just as someone's going to give him a shot and try him because tackles are so hard.
And that
to find.
means he's going potentially top 10. He might be done being projected to Seattle. I think that's going to be too late. I think in the draft.
We'll see. Depends on how many quarterbacks go. Like last year,
Sanders could be dropping a little bit. We'll have to talk about Sanders as a prospect that could potentially be a Seattle guy, because I'm hearing that he could potentially move it out of the top 15.
Wow, that would be surprising. That really would be. But anyways, yeah.
There was an offensive. Go ahead.
I was going to say, the only thing we haven't talked about is defensive line, but I think you wanted to mention another offensive lineman. So let's.
Well, I wanted to mention Tyler Booker only because I wasn't terribly impressed with this athleticism, but he did all the drills. He showed up. I don't know if it's going to necessarily drop his slot in the draft per se, but I'm not sure. You look at the tape and the tape doesn't lie. He's a good football player. But I just don't know that he's going to be a player that's going to fit Seattle's scheme. And so I was going to talk about a tackle, but I'll talk about this other tackle instead, Will Campbell. So Will Campbell has kind of been projected to go in the top 10 as the first offensive tackle off the board, LSU. But he only measured 32 and 5/8 inch arms. That's automatically going to be a disqualification for him to be a tackle in the NFL. And I think he projected as guard, he's going to fall out of that top 10 range and potentially be a candidate for Seattle at 18 if he lasts that long. And so just something to watch.
Yeah, we'll see. He is 6'6", so he's got length there, even if his arms aren't quite. He's longer than Membo, so I think there's still. I think he's still going to be viewed as a tackle, and go in there. But you're right that he might fall a little bit, because if teams are if they question whether or not he can do it, well, they're going to move him down on their board. And if enough teams move him down on their board, then he falls. And, we could end up with a good player like that dropping down into Seattle's range.
So, okay. That's it for me on the offensive side. You want to finish out with the defensive tackles. Okay.
Yeah.
So Mason Graham and Walter Nolan did not participate. I thought Ty Robinson helped himself. CJ West helped himself a little bit. James Pierce helped himself, but I think I'm hearing some stuff about James Pierce. Of course, this is the time of the year where you hear stuff about the off the field issues and whatnot. And we'll just have to take a look and see. I thought he was real impressive as far as a guy that came in to work out, ran a 4.47 40. But a guy that could have elevated himself here. It just really depends on the off the field stuff for him. Who else did you want to talk about?
A guy that I hadn't looked at much would be Colin Oliver. 6'2", 240 as I guess he would be an outside linebacker in Seattle's scheme because he's not going to be a 5 tech. But he's listed, as a defensive end. But just running, 4.56, jumping, 39 inches, there's a lot of athleticism there. And the idea of having another guy that can come off the edge and get pressure on the quarterback is always good. You can never have enough pass rushers, just straight up. You can never have enough pass rushers. And so a guy running that fast was not something that I expected really out of him. And so therefore really kind of making me take some notice.
Yeah. I thought Shamir Stewart really helped himself solidify himself in the top 15 of this draft. Landon Jackson, I thought, helped himself. Two prospects that looked like they were going to be height, weight, speed, agility kind of guys. Landon was a little bit more surprising to me. Jaw Joyner, I think, finished in the top speed or agility in almost every drill that he participated in. But Shamir Stewart really helped himself, I thought. Kind of stood out for me along with James Pierce. Defensive tackle wise, I thought Ty Robinson looked good at 4'8", 340. And I'm just trying to see. CJ West helped himself a little bit. A couple of the guys that are going to be in the range of where Seattle picks just really didn't work out. So it's kind of a mystery a little bit.
Yeah, and I wouldn't expect Seattle to take a defensive tackle early in this draft after taking one last year. No, not. I mean, they last year they took one early in Byron Murphy, and they signed Williams to a big contract. I think they need to look elsewhere and balance the roster a little bit. And so I don't really expect them to take one, in their two picks. We're currently 18 and 50. I would say I'm going to assume that they're not going to be in their range for them, and that the first one might come in at 82.
Interesting. Yeah, I could see that. I could also see them, reaching and grabbing a guy like Kenneth Grant at 331 pounds to kind of occupy the center of that defensive line, but also give you some opportunity for pass rush. I just don't think that you can ever have enough defensive guys in the interior of the trenches, because that's where games are won and lost, especially in the playoffs in the NFL. And so I wouldn't be surprised if they went in that direction again, especially if you take a look at the first round and the players available and, position strengths and so forth. A guy like Kenneth Grant might be there. Walter Nolan, if they like him, might be there. I don't know if they go for a guy like Mike Green, but he could potentially be a guy. But I agree with you in general. The preferred draft board player would definitely be an offensive lineman, I think.
Yeah, I mean,
if they
just because they have three needs there, and
right now.
And so at some point, you're not going to solve all of that in free agency. You've got to solve at least one of those three in the draft. And the most likely scenario where you're going to actually get one in the draft that can come in and be good right away is for it to be, that pick at 18, or maybe dropping down into the 20s and picking there and getting a Greg Zabel type.
Yeah, he would be an excellent fit.
But I just think you look at I can't imagine them, kicking that can down the road.
I can.
Oh man!
Unfortunately,
it was so bad last year. It was so bad.
If you read between the tea leaves on some of the things that Schneider said at the combine, during his presser, he talked about coaching, and he talked about the, Benton hire and all the guys that they brought in to essentially coach up and develop prospects in their own organization. And then he finished, or McDonald finished by saying, we have a lot of nice prospects in our on the offensive line in Seattle already that fit this scheme. And we're excited to see what we've got. So for me, it could be one player in free agency and one player in the draft, and then develop a couple of the players they've got, including Sundell, which they like. They really like him. They mention him all the time when they talk, and do not mention Oluwatimi. And then Christian Haynes, obviously, is the other player that they've talked about. And so if we can develop those two players and Sundell becomes like the offensive center starter, I would feel pretty good about heading into the off season with like a free agent guy that comes in to start, maybe left guard or offensive center, right guard, and then get a guy in the draft. And it doesn't have to be 18 overall. For me, there's some really nice prospects, even starter level guys that you can get in the second round, maybe even the third round a little bit. So it wouldn't be the sky is falling thing for me if we didn't draft an offensive lineman at 18. I really want to go best player available if you can. And at 18, you really want to have like an impact player. So that's where you get the safety we've been talking about, and just being comfortable. Maybe it's wide receiver, Keith, because if Tyler Lockett moves on, you're going to need to kind of groom another wide receiver, and an early wide receiver pick would give us the best option to have somebody that's really athletic and good. Quarterback too, if Jackson Dart's there and that's their pick, that is a player that you're not going to get a lot of impact from the draft from in year one. But you've got to make that investment at some point.
Yeah, agreed. At some point you have to, and I'm wondering when Seahawks are finally going to, go get that, and actually get better.
Yeah. Well, it's hard too, because when you feel like Seattle's not quite ready for prime time, with the current roster, the way it's constructed, without going through free agency, without going through the draft, we're just not quite there. And so you really kind of want to spend those high draft picks at places where it fills needs, but also gives us a lot of upside. And so it's almost kind of a waste if we pick a quarterback at 18, and then he really doesn't play for the first year or two. What if they extend Gino for a couple of years, and this guy just can't beat him out? But it's not. It's like it is an investment into the future, because at some point you have to have a succession plan for Geno Smith. Anyway, it was a good combine. I liked it. It wasn't tremendous as far as just the overall athleticism. I thought there were a lot of fast players. If you need fast in this draft, there's, the linebacker group, the running back group, defensive line, wide receivers, corners, all ran really fast. So you can get some speed out of this draft for sure. Athleticism, I thought, was mostly average. There's a few standout players, obviously. I'm intrigued by a couple of the quarterback prospects now. I want to see Jackson Dart and Ewers a little bit more as we go through this process, just to kind of pay attention to them a little bit more and see if that would be a good fit.
Yeah. Now we get into, with this out of the way, we get into free agency here now that we're into March.
Yeah.
And
how about we do another mock draft, a post-combine mock draft this week?
I like that. And then we'll get into, free agency stuff. That's the Seahawks
Next
still
week.
have to clear
That's
$6 million to get under the cap before the first day of the league year. So moves are coming.
Yeah, I think Jenkins is gone. to do that.
They told him to go find a trade partner.
Yeah. But we've talked about all the other moves that they have. And so, there's quite a bit of opportunity to do whatever they need to do to, do what they want in free agency. I don't think they're going to be big players in, for example, the Atlanta center Dolman. It looks like he's going to be a $20 million a year guy. And I don't think Seattle's going to look at investing that. I just don't. He'd be an ideal fit, but maybe they've got the guy on their roster. And you just got to trust the process. It's hard sometimes. You want them to go out and spend. I can see it right now, the outrage Twitter portion of the Seahawks fan base is going to be vocal, and it's going to be something. But I think you got to be able to see the long game, and it'll all come together as time goes on. So, all right, Keith, let's get out of here. Find Keith on Blue Sky at Myers NFL. You can find me at NW Seahawk. The show is Seahawks Playbook Podcast. You can find us on your favorite podcast platform, YouTube channel. Hit the subscribe button, share it, like it, leave a comment, all that good stuff. So until later this week, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook Podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NW Seahawk, Keith is at Myers NFL, and the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.